Most people disappear and leave something behind. A face, a name, a reason. She left none of those things. Just a body in a valley, in the silence that has lasted 50 years. This is The Midnight Candles, Episode 8, The Woman with No Name. Headphones on, lights off, and please, stay a while. She moved through Europe quietly. That's the only word for it, quietly. Between March and November of 1970, a woman travelled across the continent. Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, Norway. She passed through cities, border crossings, train stations. She checked into hotels, signed her name in registers, exchanged a few words with receptionists. To anyone who crossed her path, she seemed ordinary. Fashionable, some would later say. Quiet, serious. She spoke German, she spoke Flemish. Her English was poor, broken in places. Nobody thought much of it at the time. But there was something about the way she moved that wasn't quite right. She never stayed in one place for long. A few days here, a week there. And sometimes she would check into a hotel, go up to her room, and come back down to the front desk almost immediately. She wanted a different room. No explanation, just a different room. At the time, the staff probably thought nothing of it. A difficult guest, a woman with particular habits. But investigators would later realize what she was doing. She was checking exits, sight lines. Who could see her from the corridor? She used a different name at every hotel she checked into. Geneviève Lancier, Claudia Thielt, Vera Jarle, Elizabeth Leinhauer. At least 8 different names across 8 different hotels throughout Norway. Investigators only discovered this months later, after her death, when they sent her sketch to every hotel in the country and the registers started coming back with names that didn't match each other. 8 names, and not one of them led anywhere. On the morning of November 29th, 1970, a man took his 2 young daughters hiking in a valley outside Bergen, the Isdal Valley. Locals had another name for it. They called it Death Valley. Not because of anything that had happened there, just because of the terrain. Steep hills, dark forest. Not the kind of place people went for a Sunday walk. But that morning, a father and his daughters were making their way through when they noticed something among the rocks. At first it looked like debris, scattered objects, something dark. Then they got closer. The woman was lying face up. The front of her body had been almost completely destroyed by fire. Around her were a few objects. Broken bottles, a fur hat, a melted plastic container. The man took his daughters away from there as quickly as he could. Police arrived shortly after. No bag, no documents, nothing in her pockets, no identification of any kind. The body was taken in for examination. A few days later, police got a call about 2 unclaimed suitcases at Bergen railway station. And that's when things got strange. The suitcases had been sitting at Bergen railway station for days. Nobody had claimed them. Inside, clothes, cosmetics, maps, currency from several different countries. The kind of things you'd expect from someone who had been traveling for a long time. But then investigators started looking more carefully. The labels had been removed. Not from one item, not from a couple of things, from everything. Every piece of clothing, every personal item, Anything that might have had a brand name, a country of origin, a store where it was purchased. All of it gone. And it wasn't like someone had ripped them off in a hurry. It was careful, methodical. Every single label removed cleanly. Investigators also found wigs, different colors, and glasses she clearly didn't need for her vision. There was currency from Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, the UK. Small amounts. The kind of cash you carry when you don't want to use a bank account. When you don't want a paper trail. And then there were the notes. Pages covered in letters and numbers. At first glance, they looked like nothing. Random sequences. Meaningless. But military cryptologists examined them and realized they weren't random at all. It was a coded log of her movements. Dates, cities, routes across Europe. She had been keeping track of everything she did, just in a way that nobody else could understand. Which raised an obvious question. Who does that? Who travels across Europe under fake names, removes every label from their clothing, carries currency from 5 different countries, and keeps a coded diary of their own movements? Investigators didn't have an answer in 1970. They still don't have one today. The autopsy was completed on December 1st, 1970. The body had been burned almost beyond recognition, so the obvious assumption was that the fire had killed her. But it hadn't. Inside her stomach, investigators found sleeping pills, approximately 50 of them, a barbiturate called phenomal, enough to lose consciousness, enough, probably, to never wake up. So she had taken the pills first. But here's the part that I still can't get my head around. The forensic examiner found soot in her lungs, which means she was still breathing when the fire started. The pills hadn't finished the job yet. She was unconscious, or close to it, and the fire started anyway. Whether someone did that to her, or whether she had managed to set it herself before losing consciousness, nobody knows. That was never answered. There was one other thing from the autopsy that stayed with investigators. Her teeth. 14 fillings and several gold crowns. Unusual for someone her age. And the dental work didn't match anything they recognized from Norway, or Scandinavia generally. It pointed somewhere towards Central Europe, possibly Germany, possibly Belgium. That was all they had to go on. In 1970, Norway wasn't just a quiet Scandinavian country. It shared a border with the Soviet Union. It was a NATO member. And Bergen, the city where she had been spending months, was home to one of Norway's most important naval bases. American, German, and British warships ran exercises in the fjords. Soviet submarines were regularly spotted offshore. And along the Norwegian coast, a new missile system was being tested. The Penguin missile. NATO's first operational naval strike missile. Her visits to Bergen coincided with those tests. And there was something else. A waitress at one of the hotels remembered her sitting at dinner next to 2 German naval officers. Not just near them, she seemed to know them. So investigators started wondering, was she a spy? It would explain a lot. The way she moved, the coded diary, checking sightlines every time she entered a room. Those are things people are trained to do. But it doesn't quite add up either. Real spies don't move around that much. They stay somewhere, build contacts, try not to be noticed. And intelligence services give their operatives one solid identity, not 8. So maybe she wasn't gathering information. Maybe she was trying to get away from someone. Someone who eventually found her. Or maybe she found her own way out first. Nobody knows. And that question is still open today. Because nobody ever found out who she was. Not in 1970. Not in the years after. In 2017, NRK, the Norwegian national broadcaster, reopened the case together with the BBC. They ran new DNA analysis. They examined her teeth, her bones, the isotopes in her remains. They narrowed it down to a region near the French-German border. A woman probably born somewhere between 1930 and 1945. That was it. She was buried in Bergen without a name for years. Just a date on a stone. People still leave flowers there today. And I keep thinking about one thing. She spent months making sure nobody could find her. And in the end, nobody did. After 50 years, all the DNA analysis, all the investigators, all the journalists who have looked into this case, nobody has been able to answer that question. Maybe nobody ever will. If you've made it this far, you already know there's no answer at the end of this one. No name, no explanation. Just a woman in a valley in Norway, and a case that nobody has been able to close. Follow the midnight candles. A new story is waiting every week. The candle is always lit. Sleep well, night souls.